Man's Search for Meaning. Written by Viktor Frankl. Summarized by goldreaders.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Introduction. It is impossible for anyone who did not personally experience life as a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp to truly understand what it was like. Despite this, it is important to try and comprehend the daily struggles and the mental fortitude it took for these individuals to endure such horrific circumstances. Viktor Frankl, who himself survived the camps, sheds light on this subject through his observations and experiences. He used these experiences as evidence for his psychological theory of logotherapy, which states that finding meaning in life is essential, even in the direst of situations, in order to thrive and survive. These summaries provides an in-depth look at Frankl's findings from his time in the camps and his development of logotherapy. It covers topics such as how to find purpose and meaning in life, how the concentration camps destroyed the hope of its prisoners, the surprising discovery of humor amidst such tragedy. Chapter 1. Hope and Horror. Today, people have a general understanding of the cruel and inhumane acts committed in concentration camps throughout Germany and Eastern Europe during the Nazi regime. Similarly, those who were targeted by Nazi violence during the Holocaust had some knowledge of the terrible fate that awaited them. Given this information, one might assume that the initial reaction upon entering the camps would have been fear. However, the reactions of prisoners were divided into three phases. The first phase began upon arrival at the camp or even while they were being transported. The prisoners were so shocked by their situation that they desperately tried to convince themselves that everything would be okay. Despite having heard terrible stories about the camps, they told themselves that their experiences would be different. For example, upon arrival at the death camp Auschwitz, prisoners were separated into two groups as they exited the train, one for hard labor and one for immediate execution. However, none of them knew the significance of these groups. Due to the shock of the situation, the prisoners succumbed to the delusion of reprieve, falsely believing that the line they were in would somehow save them from certain death. During this first phase, the newly arrived prisoners were greatly frightened by everything happening around them. They struggled to handle the intense emotions of witnessing other prisoners being punished in brutal ways for trivial offenses. Confronted with grotesque brutality, they soon lost hope and began to see death as a form of relief. Many of them even considered suicide as a way out, perhaps by touching the electrical fence surrounding the camp. Chapter 2. No Future, No Meaning. The prisoners in concentration camps went through a traumatic experience that left a lasting impact on their emotional and psychological well-being. At first, they were overwhelmed by the horrors that surrounded them, but over time, they became desensitized to the death and violence. Their focus shifted from their feelings to survival as they struggled to cope with the extreme deprivation and hardship in the camps. As a result of this emotional dullness, prisoners no longer felt disgust or pity towards the death and decay around them. Rather, they saw opportunities to grab any resources, such as food or clothing, that would increase their chances of survival. The lack of a foreseeable end to their captivity, coupled with the constant threat of violence from the guards, left prisoners unable to imagine a future or find meaning in their lives. In contrast to our typical view of life, where we make plans and look forward to the future, prisoners in concentration camps did not have this luxury. They gave up on the idea of a future, as they did not know when or if they would be released. The prisoners were simply existing in the camps, rather than living. They had no goals or aspirations, and their experiences left a lasting impact on their outlook and perspective on life. Chapter 3. Finding Joy After Suffering. The aftermath of being freed from concentration camps was often a tumultuous experience for survivors. After having endured such immense suffering, many prisoners found it difficult to adjust to a normal life again. At first, they felt a sense of disbelief that they were finally free, and their emotions were numb, unable to experience joy or pleasure. Despite having dreamed of liberation, the reality of being freed often felt surreal and unbelievable. However, the challenges didn't end there. Many survivors felt a sense of anger and bitterness, having been subjected to such inhumanity. Some sought to take revenge against their former captors and guards, while others felt a need to make others understand the extent of their suffering. Upon returning home, they were often met with further disappointment as they found that their families had been killed and their homes were in ruins. The lack of empathy and understanding from others, who hadn't experienced the horrors of the concentration camps, only added to their bitterness. They expected that their experiences would be acknowledged and that their suffering would be understood, but instead, many were met with indifference, with people telling them that they too had suffered from the war. Despite these obstacles, many survivors were eventually able to move on and find happiness once more, grateful for the fact that they had survived the Holocaust. Life after liberation was a difficult journey, but for many, it was a testament to their resilience and strength. Chapter 4. Pushing against all odds. Surviving the horrors of concentration camps required a strong will and a focus on the inner self. The prisoners would concentrate on their thoughts, memories, and imagination as a means of distraction from the cruel reality of their situation. Many found comfort in thinking about their loved ones and reminiscing about their past. These moments of happiness, even if they were only in their minds, were something that the guards couldn't take away from them. Some prisoners sought refuge in nature and humor, finding fleeting moments of joy in small things like watching a sunset or listening to a bird's song. During their brief lunch break, prisoners would gather and try to take their minds off things by singing songs or performing small acts. There were also instances of prisoners finding a sense of humor, imagining their futures, and making light of their experiences. For example, they might joke about how their camp routines would affect them once they were free, such as forgetting table manners at a family dinner and asking for soup from the bottom of the bowl. Chapter 5. The Battle for Freedom. Most prisoners in concentration camps during World War II had little control over their lives, as they were subjected to inhumane treatment and forced to live in harsh conditions. Nevertheless, some prisoners tried to hold on to their freedom of choice and make decisions whenever they could. These decisions often meant the difference between life and death. In some cases, prisoners were ordered to be transferred to another camp, but were not informed about their true destination or the meaning of the transfer. The guards sometimes referred to these as rest camps, but prisoners were uncertain if they were being taken to their deaths. When prisoners realized they were going to be transferred, some would try to change their fate by working harder for their captors, for example, volunteering for extra shifts. However, it was impossible for them to know what decision would be best for them, and many chose not to interfere with their fate. There were also prisoners who were determined to keep their tiny freedoms, and took any opportunity to make decisions. Despite their dire conditions, they tried to live by their own values and beliefs as much as possible. For example, they continued to practice their spiritual beliefs, even though they may have had to abandon some of their rituals. Some prisoners also upheld high moral standards, such as giving bread to those in greater need, even though they were hungry themselves. Chapter 6. Surviving Trauma with Logotherapy. The author, during their time in a concentration camp, witnessed many distressing events and came to understand the significance of meaning in one's life. The individuals who were able to cling onto meaning, despite the horrific circumstances, were found to be more robust and resilient compared to those who lost it. This observation reinforced the author's beliefs in the theory of psychotherapy, called logotherapy, which states that our pursuit of meaning is the strongest driving force in our lives. Research supports this notion, as a study conducted by Johns Hopkins University showed that 78% of the students surveyed believed that finding purpose and meaning in life was the most essential aspect. When meaning is not present in one's life, it creates a void referred to as an existential vacuum. People who struggle to live according to their values or feel like their life lacks purpose will experience this emptiness. An existential vacuum is not restricted to those who undergo traumatic events, as evidenced by the common phenomenon of Sunday neurosis, where individuals feel a sense of emptiness after a structured week of work. Logotherapy aims to assist individuals in discovering meaning, thereby avoiding the negative consequences that stem from a prolonged existential vacuum. Chapter 7. An Inside Look. According to logotherapy, the search for purpose in life is not a matter of discovering it but rather creating it through our actions and the choices we make. The choices we make and the responsibilities we take on determine our meaning in life. This is evident in the experiences of prisoners in concentration camps, who were able to find purpose and meaning by making choices such as finding beauty in nature or helping others. The meaning of life is subjective and unique to each individual, much like a best move in a game of chess is dependent on the situation. Logotherapy acknowledges this and seeks to help people understand that their lives can have meaning, and that they must determine their own purpose through their decisions. The meaning of life is not limited and can encompass both personal and societal factors. For example, a person might find personal meaning in their job at a recycling startup, or see their impact on society through the improvement of others' lives. The possibilities for life's meaning are endless and depend on the individual's unique set of circumstances and decisions. Chapter 8. Overcoming Fears with Logotherapy. Logotherapy is a form of psychotherapy that was developed to help individuals find meaning in life. However, it has evolved and can be used to assist individuals who have developed mental disorders as a result of an existential vacuum. The approach of logotherapy is different from traditional psychotherapy, as it focuses on internal factors affecting the patient, instead of external events and circumstances. Logotherapy believes that individuals have the capability to make decisions and determine the purpose of their life, independent of their environment. To help individuals overcome their fears and anxieties, logotherapy incorporates the concept of paradoxical intention. This technique asks the patient to face their fear head-on, instead of avoiding it. For example, if someone has a fear of blushing in public, logotherapy may ask them to try and blush as much as possible when in a crowd. This approach often leads to the realization that the fear disappears when one tries to force it. Conclusion. Discovering the meaning and purpose in our lives is crucial for our success, and even for our mere existence. This meaning can come from any source that is significant to the individual, regardless of whether it is a lofty or a simple one, as long as it provides a sense of direction and fulfillment in their current situation.